Alrighty, so today I'm going to do a bit of a fun video where I'm going to talk about MLS team that I hate and love for this upcoming season, or in other words, MLS team that I would be rooting for this season, or teams that I would definitely not be rooting and kind of despise them for this upcoming season. Now, I have done something similar to this, I think, last year when I did a video talk about the 5 teams that I hate and the 5 teams that I like in MLS, and that in this video it's kind of expanded where I'm going to include all of the team. And also, you know, as a guy that have watched every single MLS game and review every single MLS game for the past couple of years, you're going to start to get to a point where, you know, even as much as I watch these games that's not involved my team, there's times where I would actually openly root for that a certain team to do well, or even in a season. And that this is why in this video I'm kind of want to share my opinion of which are those teams that I would definitely be rooting for them for this upcoming season, and also those that I would definitely despise, and also those that are, you know, it can be a night and day, and it could be given depending on the situation of whether or not I'd be rooting for them or I won't be rooting for them. So with that being said, let us actually first, before we get into this, talk about the teams that I support. So, you know, the 2 teams that I support is Minnesota United and the San Jose Earthquakes. I've been a Loons fan since 2017 when they came into the league, and I've been a Quakes fan since 2013 as they are my local team. Now, you can probably tell why I root for both of these teams very hard, not just because, you know, I have gone to watch both of these teams the most out of any team during my time watching MLS game in person, but also they are the 2 teams I talk about the longest in terms of some of the reviews that I've done involving these teams. I mean, you notice how I tend to do like a 10-minute review in terms of talk about a game that either Minnesota or the Quakes or even both teams are involved at the same time, because I want to kind of share that emotion and just kind of share my deep analysis of either I'm being very frustrated with how the team has been playing, and that's kind of the case for the Quakes for the last couple of years, or I'm kind of happy of how the team is playing, and there's some optimism that things is going to go well. But with that being said, let us actually begin, and we're actually going to go backwards in terms of the alphabetical order. So Vancouver fans, you're welcome. For once, you're not actually going to be last in terms of me ranking you, whether I like you or hate you for this upcoming season. And for the Whitecaps, yeah, there's definitely a case that I would root for them, and I do love the Whitecaps. I mean, the Whitecaps, you know, if I had to have another team that I could root for in the Western Conference, I would say the Whitecaps is definitely that team, mainly because of Vanni Sartini. I mean, Vanni Sartini is just such a guy that you just simply cannot love him. I mean, the energy and the passion that he brings to the team is something that is good to see. And another thing I will also say that could be a key of why I love the team is it could be a team that maybe is not doing very well, kind of like an underdog kind of story that could do some good things, and I think the Whitecaps can be that team. I mean, it's kind of I kind of also have that or that personality that likes teams that love to be kind of like the lovable loser, but somehow still able to provide a spark to a point where they can be a playoff contender, and that kind of is the case for the Whitecaps. I mean, this is a team that has suffered a lot throughout their time in MLS. Not a lot of success, but now bringing a guy like Vanni Sartini and started to now be decent in these past couple of years. Yeah, the Whitecaps has always been a team that I have a huge soft spot for. Then we go to Toronto FC, and for Toronto, again, I think they're kind of neutral. You know, I do love to see guys like Lorenzo Insigne and Benedeschi in terms of lighting it up in the league, and I love the talent that of course it brings to the table. But again, there are also teams that at times that you know, during the dynasty run that they had, well, I wouldn't say dynasty, but the good run that they had in the mid 2010s, I mean, I can see why some people hated them, especially if you're a team in the Eastern Conference, because of them being such a powerhouse. I mean, notice when you of course are being a powerhouse or a team that is really good, you're gonna definitely develop some hatred, especially from fans that are kind of maybe a little bit jealous in terms of all the good things that you've done. And I think the other thing that maybe gets fans hating TFC is the fact that they spend like the most out of many team in the league. They tend to love to spend money rather than kind of develop within and stuff like that. But still, there's times where I do root for TFC, and again, just the talent wise, love to see those well-known talented player on their team like Benedeschi and Insigne just kind of put on a show that we definitely didn't think that was kind of the case a couple of years ago, even though I know TFC is going for a really big Italian kind of movement with signing so many of these well-known Italian players. But now moving on to St. Louis. Yeah, St. Louis is going to be in the part where I love and I would be rooting for this season. And this shouldn't be a surprise because I always love rooting for expansion team. I mean, last season when Charlotte was in the league, they were also another team that I root for because of the fact that, I want to see an expansion team to do well. I want to see what they can bring to the table, and that goes the same for Austin FC too, even back in the 2020 season. And also, when we talk about Nashville, Inter Miami, and you get what I'm trying to say here. Yeah. So St. Louis, again, I'll be rooting for them to see how they're going to do in their expansion season, and hope for them to have a decent expansion season like what we've seen in these past expansion teams that have come into the league. Now, we go to Seattle, and this is the first team that belongs in the X mark, and you probably know why Seattle is a team that I despise a lot. I mean, it is definitely one of the more hated team in MLS because of the obnoxious kind of mentality that the fan base, of course, had always talked about how they're being the best, which I can understand because again, Seattle is a team that has had a lot of success, and let's not forget they are the first team to win CCL out of any MLS team in CCL history, and that they have every right to brag about the success. But I think what I hate about Seattle the most is the fact that the two teams that I root for. Yeah, I'll tell you what, the Sounders, they own Minnesota for a long time, but still haven't forgot about what happened in the 2020 Western Conference Final. That still definitely sticks in me. And then, of course, with the Quakes, for a long time, the Quakes always lose to the Seattle Sounders. I mean, didn't they had like one point where they lost them like 13 straight time, and that was like the longest active losing at a team face against another opponent. Yeah, you can understand why I do despise Seattle, and that I will continue to do so, unless if maybe their dominance has started to kind of wear off, and maybe the fact that they don't just always create some headache whenever I watch my team face against the Sounders, and it's always just going to be an automatic L. But now moving to RSL. Yeah, RSL is definitely a team that I would root for again. This is a team that I really root for during the time when they were in the playoffs in 2021. Just kind of a Cinderella story under Pablo Mastroeni, making it all the way to the Western Conference Final. And it's also kind of a team that, it's a team that believe in the academy and believe in the fact that they don't need to have a superstar kind of player to really carry the team. I mean, there are definitely some well-known name in that RSL team too, but it's a team that I think has that kind of vibe of being kind of like the underdog and always overperforming their expectation, and that I always love to root for those kind of teams, and that's why I do love RSL. Now, the Portland Timbers. Again, I think they're right around here. Now, I know I talk a lot of Quakes fan, and one thing I know about a lot of Quakes fan is that if there are teams that they hate besides the LA team, it's got to be the Cascadia team. And again, I already talked about Seattle, of why a lot of Quakes fans hate the Sounders because they just cannot win against them. But it's the same thing for the Portland Timbers too. I mean, besides maybe at home, though, their home form against the Timbers hasn't been as good as it used to be, where they always win at home. Though saying that, last season they did beat the Timbers, and I was there in person to see it. This is a team that the Quakes have always struggled whenever that they play them on the road, and I definitely still won't forget what happened in 2019 when they lost to the Timbers to miss out on the playoffs. But in terms of Minnesota, again, I feel like the Timbers have always been an opponent that the Loons always like to face, and not to mention, this is definitely a team that will always associate as the first team that the Loons, of course, face in their first ever game in their expansion season, although not in a good way because they lost 5-1 in that one. But yeah, there's given days that I do like the Timbers, but there are also given days that I do hate them, especially for I can understand why Quakes fans does kind of despot them, just the way that those Cascadia team always tends to create some pain and suffering in terms of whenever the Quakes face against them. But now we move on to the Philadelphia Union. Yeah, the Union is definitely a team that I think the Union is probably one of the few teams that I would say that are a real powerhouse that everybody actually still love them and still root for them. Although, unless of course you are one of those teams in the Northeast Corridor region. The reason why I think the Union is pretty easy to root for is that they're a team that believes in the academy, and that they're kind of for many times I've said that they're kind of like the people's team in MLS, because they're doing exactly what an MLS team or a successful MLS team is what the league is trying for every team to strive on. Believe in the academy, develop some good players, and eventually sell them all for big amount of money, but also still withstand yourself as a top echelon in the league, and the Union has done a great job in terms of it. In fact, Jim Curran has always been one of my favorite head coach, and there's a reason why he's been linking with the U.S. men's national team job for a while, because of how well he's done doing his decade-long reign with the Union now. But it's just simply because the fact that the amount of academy talent that the Union is producing, and especially now producing into the U.S. men's national team level. Yeah, again, that's why there's a lot of people that loves the Union, even if they are starting to become a juggernaut. And that usually when you see teams that kind of dominate in the league, there is definitely that start of this taste and that dislike between that team and certain fans that maybe used to like the team. But moving on to Orlando City. So Orlando has been a team that, again, I don't really like Orlando. Again, a lot has to do with the fan base, and also what happened last year in the U.S. Open Cup, where I was definitely rooting for Sacramento to make history, and it wasn't meant to be. And not only we'll definitely will not forget about the whole scandal situation, which I know that eventually was kind of something that I had a feeling that it wasn't going to get out of hand. Maybe the U.S. Soccer Federation was just going to put a big slap of the wrist on Orlando City part, but they're not going to just kind of reprehend the trophy and just kind of relinquish their chances of winning the U.S. Open, or their title that they of course got, the U.S. Open Cup. So yeah, that's kind of something that was frustrating to see, that for a while Orlando City was kind of like the villain while everybody was rooting for Sacramento. But again, in general, the fan base is definitely one of the more obnoxious one, but in a way where, again, they're kind of being obnoxious in a way where they haven't really had a lot to show for. I mean, when you look at their time in MLS and really their time in this then, I mean, they won a couple of USL championships on the way, but when they come to MLS, I mean, yes, they did win the U.S. Open Cup, but that's about it in terms of some of the success where if you're gonna be obnoxious, at least be maybe some successful, like what we see with Seattle winning multiple trophy. And that, yeah, again, Orlando City, they've never been a team that I really like because of that kind of just self-obnoxious kind of behavior, thinking that they're a big club, but in reality they're not that case, and that they've suffered so many heartbreaks even during the early part of their franchise history in MLS. Now we go to NYCFC. Again, NYCFC is kind of right between, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that some of those big name players from NYCFC is no longer there, that I don't have as strong kind of like likableness with NYCFC as I used to. Always loved to see when David Villa was part of this team, and even Maximo Morales being there. And then, of course, later on, seeing Tati Castellanos being such a great player in the league was kind of fun to watch. But all three of those guys is no longer with the team, so I kind of lost that likableness with NYCFC, and that, again, they're just kind of now become a team that, on certain day I'll definitely root for them if they're playing against a team that I don't like. But if they're definitely playing against one of my team or one of the team that I root for, I would definitely not be rooting for NYCFC when that of course does happen. Now we go to the New York Red Bulls. For the Red Bulls, again, it's kind of the same thing. And again, I remember the days watching guys like Bradley Wright Phillips and even Thierry Henry, and how there's a reason why a lot of people like the Red Bulls and bring those kind of big name player. And not to mention, another thing that I like about the Red Bulls is the academy. Again, you probably now also seen a pattern that I always tend to like teams that are academy driven, and guys that come out of the academy and develop to be a decent player. And that's what the Red Bulls, of course, has done for a bit. I mean, after all, they did produce a very good holding midfielder by the name of Tyler Adams in this last couple of years, and now he's part of the U.S. men's national team. But again, it's getting to a point where there aren't really producing as much kind of a talent. It's kind of a mad team to root for. And not to mention, the only thing I will also say that I would really root for the Red Bulls to do is to finally maybe break through and win an MLS Cup, because they have had so many heartbreak in the playoffs and so many so Metro moment. But other than that, they're a team that, just like their intercity rival, it's kind of it's night and day when I do root for the Red Bulls or not. But now moving to New England, and for the Revs, I will say that for the Revs, they were a little bit higher on my list, because I just simply want to see Bruce Arena able to guide a team like the Revs, who has really become the Buffalo Bills of MLS, losing so many MLS Cup. Well, I wouldn't say the Buffalo Bills, but more like I would say the Minnesota Vikings of the MLS. The Vikings were a team that had been to multiple Super Bowl in the 70s, and they lost all of them, and that's the same case for New England. Been to multiple MLS Cup during the late well, actually, not I don't think they were in the MLS Cup in the 90s. It was more like in the early 2000s and in the mid 2000s, and that, again, the Revs, they have came close at least a couple of years ago when they made it to the Eastern Conference Final, but they weren't able to get to the Promised Land. And then they had that record-breaking season, winning the Supporter Shield. That was very enjoyable to see the Revs team make that history, but they didn't make it to MLS Cup. And that, it was getting to a point where, with the way that Bruce Arena started to think about retiring, and that this team has started to kind of get a little bit unrecognizable to those teams a couple of years ago. Yeah, my interest of the Revs isn't as high as I was with them a couple of years ago, where I really root for them to finally break the curse of them finally winning their first ever MLS Cup on their potential sixth attempt of reaching MLS Cup. But now we go to Nashville. For Nashville, I would say they're kind of starting to become here. And again, over time with expansion teams, there are times where they do go a little bit lower in my rankings of teams that I would root for. I mean, when they came into the league, this was definitely a team that I would root for, because it's an expansion team. But I'm starting to, I think the only thing I still root for Nashville is seeing the fact that they have a very good defense, and also seeing Hani Mukhtar play, and how he is just an absolute stud, and is probably the reason why he is the reigning MVP of this team, just single-handedly carrying this team. But then there's also times when I watch them play. And another thing that I also will say in terms of my likeness of a team is just the way how they play and the style that they play. If it's kind of like a boring team and kind of just some snooze fest kind of team, yeah, those are kind of team that I don't really like. And I think that maybe goes for the Red Bulls too, where there's times where they do play a bit of a kind of slow and sluggish kind of game that I don't really kind of like to see, as a person that is kind of like many of these soccer fans that want to see some chaos and high octane kind of soccer and so forth. And that's just not what Nashville brings to the table. It's a team that always focus on the defensive side first, and then hopefully that Hani Mukhtar, of course, can bail them out by scoring a couple of goals to get them all points. But again, it's getting to a point where with some of these talented players start to well, I wouldn't say they're some of these talented players have lose their traction, because I think Honey Mukhtar is still going to be good, but they're not a team that I would say I would be rooting as high as I was a couple of years ago, when the hype was definitely surround this team. Well, not really the hype, but just the way that they were a team that wasn't getting a lot of hype because they were overshadowed by what Inter Miami does, and that they just kind of came out of nowhere to be kind of like a small town market to become a decent team in MLS and make it to the playoffs in their first expansion season. And not only that, even winning a playoff game and go as deep as what we've seen any expansion team has gone in MLS history. But now we move on to Montreal. So for a long time, I've said Montreal is one of my favorite team, and it remains that case. If there's a team that I would root for in the Eastern Conference, it's definitely Montreal, especially with the way that last year, it was definitely very enjoyable seeing Montreal finally get a chance to have some success and develop all those good talented players, and then eventually sold them off to this off season. Now this year is going to be tough when it comes to kind of rooting for Montreal and see how they're going to do in terms of having a new head coach in Hernan Losada and losing a lot of those good talented players that they saw in the off season. But still, again, if there is a team that I would really love to see, it's definitely Montreal, because the supporters, they're very, very hardcore. They really love their team, and that they definitely deserve to see their team to do well. And especially, I think when Montreal is a team that do well, the fans will show up and they will make a lot of noise, as we've seen in those playoff game last season. But now we go to Inter Miami. I would say Inter Miami is kind of right here. Before, I will say that Inter Miami was kind of like right near around here, where there were definitely some dislike with the way that I think the way that kind of dislike is the fact that they try to sign all these big name kind of player and hope that it of course would stay and that that kind of hype level eventually did run out real quick, and it just kind of at times maybe kind of got a little bit annoying, the fact that, hey, this is Inter Miami, and it's a reminder that this team, of course, is owned by David Beckham. But recently, I think I started like this team a little bit more, mainly because not only the fact that they corrected their mistake in terms of just simply getting butts in the seat because they're hiring or getting guys that are way past their prime and kind of getting some MLS 2.0 kind of things. That just does not work in this era of MLS. But now actually the building within and getting some young talented player that maybe not a lot of people might thought that they of course could be decent, but now they're definitely within the spotlight again. It's kind of like an underdog story, and also I think the other dislike of Inter Miami has to do with the sanction that they had to go through, and them getting to a point where they broke the rule. Kind of give me a LA Galaxy kind of vibe, but again, they have took that sanction very well, and in some way I think that sanction kind of helped them to a point where they just kind of had to develop within, and it seems like they've done a really good job in terms of that. Now we go to LAFC, and I'm actually going to put the Galaxy too, because my opinion, every time when it comes to LA team, as a person living in Northern California, you just simply cannot root for LA teams, and that kind of rings true in MLS too. I just cannot bring to me rooting for LAFC and the Galaxy. Though I will say this, I think I have started to get much more of a distaste toward LAFC than it is for LA Galaxy, because of the success that they of course had, and just the ridiculous stack kind of roster that they had, that I do kind of have that jealousy of the fact that, yeah, I mean, it's hard for a team to try to compete against such a stacked team like LAFC, whereas the Galaxy has been a team that has been pretty hated because of all the dynasty run that they had, and of course winning those 5 championships, the most out of any team, And I think the other thing that's you could also say is kind of annoying and maybe is still is the fact that the fan base are still trying to reminiscent of the past and just kind of brag about the fact that yeah we still have the most MLS Cup even though we're not doing well. But yeah, I think they're starting to kind of become a little bit more distaste toward LAFC because at least in the case of the team that I root for, I mean the Quakes have been the Galaxy multiple times before, and that is not the same with LAFC, especially with them a couple of times just smacking the Quakes to pieces. And the same goes for Minnesota United too, although again the Loons, at least in the early days, they were doing well against LAFC, but recently, of course, they're starting to not do it as well as it is. Though I will say that, talk about the Galaxy in a Loons perspective, there are also that hatred with the way that, I still remember that playoff loss against them at Allianz Field. That was the first ever playoff game for the Loons, and that was kind of disappointing because there was a chance that team made it to the playoffs for the first time ever, could actually do some good things, and we kind of found that out in the very next season, and they fall short because of the fact that they lost to the Galaxy. But now at the next team, which is Sporting KC. Yeah, Sporting KC is another team that I don't really like. And again, going back to the two teams that I root for, there's a reason why I don't like Sporting KC. For the Quakes, they always tend to struggle against Sporting KC. And then I haven't forgot about what happened in 2020 when that epic game that they had against Sporting KC ended because of the fact that Tim Melia was just an absolute wall and saved all the penalty. And then, of course, in a Loons perspective, I know the league has always pushed that narrative that the Loons and Sporting KC are considered to be rivals, even though I know both fan bases probably don't say it is the case. And it feels like the whole notion, the nicest rivalry in MLS, just feels very cringe-worthy and stuff. But there are times where I do get frustrated when the Loons play against Sporting KC. I mean, especially on the road, too. I mean, on the road, besides that one game in the playoffs, they just have not been able to beat Sporting KC on the road. Like, Children Mercy Park has just been a house of horror for Minnesota United for a long time. And the same goes when they, of course, play them at Allianz. Well, actually, not to an extent in a way similar to when they play on the road. But there's times where Sporting KC have frustrated Minnesota United at home, especially the last couple of seasons. So, yeah, Sporting KC is definitely one of the teams that I don't really root for that much, mainly because of the team that I support just doesn't have a good history when it comes to facing against them. But then we go to the Houston Dynamo. Oh, also not to mention, the other reason why I hate Sporting KC, Alan Pulido should have been a Quakes player. I mean, I'm still kind of bitter the fact that he went to Sporting KC instead of the Quakes when there was a big opportunity that he could have gone to the Quakes, knowing the fact that it wouldn't make sense because, hey, Mateus Almeida, he only decided to gather some of this former player, and Alan Pulido is a prime target with him playing under Almeida during the time when Pulido was with Chivas, and this would have made perfect sense instead of just him joining Sport in KC, and that the Quakes could have easily broke the bank in terms of signing him, but the cheapness kind of eventually cost them, and also not to mention just him decided to choose a different location instead, like Sporting KC. Again, it's kind of weird the fact that he decided to choose Sporting KC when he could have literally had a chance to play for his former head coach in Almeida. That would have made perfect sense. So I'm still kind of a little bit bitter about that. Well, actually, I wouldn't say a little bit bitter because I'm kind of a little bit over with it, but it's at that time I was kind of bitter to see him decide to go to Sporting KC instead of being joining the Quakes when it looked like that was going to be the case. Now we go to the Houston Dynamo. I know Houston is one of those teams that, as a Quakes fan, we will never forget about how they stole the 2 MLS Cup away from us, and especially the whole controversy with them moving to Houston back in 2005. But besides that, there's really not much hatred, I would say, that I have with the Houston Dynamo, besides the fact that the Quakes cannot get a win against the Dynamo on the road, no matter what it is. And they also have caused some pain to the Quakes whenever they play at home. For Minnesota, again, it's the same thing. They always tend to struggle against the Dynamo on the road, but at least recently at home, they have been able to find some success, and they always tends to beat them at home. And that, again, I think Houston is kind of similar to what the Quakes is in a way, where it's a cheap ownership. That their fan base definitely deserve better. But at least in the case of Houston, is at least they have found a new ownership, and they are finally having owners that are a little bit more ambitious in terms of signing players and hope to get the team back as good as they were a couple years ago. So yeah, at least there's that kind of hope for them. But again, Houston is kind of a team that, again, I think, going back to what I said about it could be night and day, that was kind of rooting for them to beat the Galaxy, because we just want to have the laugh once again with the Galaxy missing out of the playoffs on decision day, and that's exactly what happened a couple of years ago too. Now we go to FC Dallas. Yeah, Dallas is definitely a team that I would root for, and I know this is of course fresh off of that loss in the playoffs where Dallas was able to beat Minnesota in a PK shootout. But that loss didn't really hurt as much as what I talked about, the Seattle playoff loss, or maybe the Portland loss that they had in the previous season, because I think that was just one of those cases where they were in a PK shootout, and they just were on the wrong end of a coin flip when it comes to PK shootout. But for a long time I love FC Dallas, and I mentioned it already about how I love seeing teams that believe in their academy and able to develop some good academy player that turns out to be a great U.S. men's national team player. Well, there's no team in MLS that have produced some future U.S. men's national team player, and especially players that have now contribute regularly in the World Cup, than what FC Dallas has had. I mean, there's just so many names out there that come out of this Dallas academy that shines for the U.S. men's national team, and that they're going to continue to be labeled as probably the best academy in MLS, even though I know the Union is trying to stake in that claim. But also the fact that this is also a team that I would really hope that eventually they get that reward of having a decent academy, and love to promote within an MLS Cup, because it's kind of hard to believe that for a team that has been making the playoffs regularly, they're kind of like the New York Red Bulls, never able to get it done in the big game, and even in the one MLS Cup where they had against the Colorado Rapids, they weren't able to win that one, and they actually got upset in that one because they were heavy favorites in that game against Colorado in 2010. But now moving to DC United. Yeah, I think I definitely would be rooting for DC for this season, mainly because I want to see Wayne Rooney at least have some success, similar to what we saw in 2018 with the Rooney and Lucha Roux kind of connection. But now just more in terms of the coaching and the fact that all the moves that he had made this season, it's going to turns out to go well. But I would say that DC maybe will be sitting right down there here if they decide to fire Wayne Rooney, and that all these moves, of course, doesn't quite work out. I mean, you basically get why I really want to root for DC. I really want to see Wayne Rooney to be successful, and we'll see whether or not that is the case. Now we go to Columbus, and for Columbus, it's kind of the same reason I said about DC with the head coach. I also love Wilfried Nancy, and he is considered to be one of my favorite head coach, especially of the job that he's done with with Montreal last year. And let's see what he can do now with a relatively stacked Columbus team that should have made the playoffs if it wasn't for Caleb Porter kind of manage and just completely repeatedly get that team to melt down in the last 15 minutes of the game. And not to mention, there's also some player on the team that I really love to see. Guys like Cucho Hernandez really reminds me of Joseph when he came into the league, and Lucas Arian, always a fun player to watch when I see him play, whether on TV or in person, which I don't think I've seen Lucas Arian play in person. I mean, I did went to that All-Star game last year in Minnesota, but I don't think he actually played in that one, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I might be mistaken. I think maybe I did see him play. He's such a fun player to watch him. Kind of reminds me of when Reynoso, of course, is playing for Minnesota United. But now we go to Colorado. Again, Colorado is a team that I would definitely root for. And also, I know I put Columbus kind of in the neutral part, but this is kind of like right at the range where I'm kind of on the fence of rooting for them, but also kind of not rooting for them. And for Colorado, I would say it's the kind of the same reason I said with the last two teams of the reason why I would root for them. Robin Fraser is another head coach that I really love, and also just the overall philosophy of this team, just kind of that Moneyball approach, and able to get a decent team to be able to make some regular playoff appearance until last season, just to show you that it's kind of a great underdog story, and just another example of sometimes a team doesn't need to break the bank and just spend ridiculous amount of players to be successful. And again, that's another characteristic I like when it comes to rooting for a team. I like these teams that maybe is a little bit cheap, and most of that has to do with the ownership, but still able to do what they are given to be able to get themselves to be competitive in their conference. But now we go to FC Cincinnati. Yeah, I definitely love FC Cincinnati. Again, this is another team that is a lovable loser kind of type of story, where it's finally great to see that FC Cincinnati had a great season last year. Not only not winning the wooden spoon for the 4th year in a row, but actually making the playoffs and winning a playoff game. And also, again, they're kind of the philosophy that they follow is similar to what I said about the Union, where I love the philosophy that they follow, where they get the best out of the limited amount of player that they have. Though, unlike the Union, Cincinnati, I don't think they have a lot of decent academy pieces that they can just promote within. But instead, what I do love is the fact that, again, this is a team that I've said it many times before. I always feel bad for FC Cincinnati when they had those bad seasons, and I really want them to eventually have the fan base to taste some success. And I hope last season was just a beginning of it, because I think what Pat Nolan and Chris Albright is building on this team is something special, and that it's really easy to root for them to eventually do something very special in these upcoming years. Maybe even I know this might be crazy to say, maybe an MLS Cup could be something in the future. Like, what, that would be such an incredible story if FC Cincinnati would win MLS Cup within these next couple of years, after they've been considered to be the laughing stock of the league when they came in for the first free season. But now we move on to the Chicago Fire. Again, the Chicago Fire, again, this is another team that lose a lot of time, and they're kind of like a lovable loser too, that I just really was hoping eventually Fire fans can have a chance to see this team be successful again. I know they taste that success back in the 2017 season, but that's about it. For the last decade, it's been nothing but pain for the Chicago Fire team, and unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's going to change with the way that, again, they didn't really make a lot of addition, and that they're just hoping that the roster that they built recently is good enough to once again compete. But yeah, this is a team that I would definitely root for, to hope to have some success. And not to mention Ezra Hendrickson, another head coach that I really like. I really root for him to do well with this team, and yeah, that's kind of one of the many reasons why I do root for the Chicago Fire. Now we go to Charlotte, and for Charlotte, again, when you have an expansion team, you're going to get a case where myself included, that you're going to be rooting for. But even when the expansion season is over, you're still going to be rooting for that team, because they're still relatively young, and that you want to see how they're going to develop to be a team that whether they can continue that success that they had in the expansion season. And there's no doubt that Charlotte had a decent expansion season, and I'm very excited to see what they can do, and that I'll be rooting for them to once again make it to the playoffs. And I wouldn't say do something similar to what Austin did, but definitely show that they can be already on the cusp of being a playoff team, and kind of overcome a lot of City, consider, just when in the beginning of the expansion season, this team was so bare bone to a point where it looked like we were in for an FC Cincinnati type of expansion season. Notice how I mentioned how there's been some expansion teams that I thought might be in an FC Cincinnati kind of expansion season, and it turns out to do well. And maybe I should say the same thing about St. Louis too, and somehow they turn out to do well. But then we go to Austin. For Austin, again, it's another relatively new franchise, but they're starting to go down on my list, mainly because, again, it goes to the factors, the fan base maybe started to become a little bit too obnoxious, even though they haven't had a lot of success. I mean, Austin fans were definitely showing their displeasure with the way that a lot of people kind of underrated them and stuff like that. Now, I will say that I do enjoy the fans and the culture that they of course would build. But I think the other thing that you also have to add with the reason why maybe a lot of people might not like Austin, including myself, is Anthony Precott is still the guy that owns this team. And I know Columbus fan, they're probably still very triggered about it to this day, which is why I really wish that eventually Austin would be playing Columbus at Lower.com Field, because the amount of boos you can imagine if Anthony Precott is actually attending that game. Oh yeah, he's gonna get showered by some of the loudest boos I will hear an MLS team greet to a person that is considered to be a snake, and a guy that just kind of shamed the Columbus Crew franchise to a point where they looked like they were the one that was going to be moving to Austin. But now moving to Atlanta United. Again, I'm going to put them in the same spot where I don't think they're as much as I hate as I was a couple years ago. Again, a couple years ago I would put them right around this spot, and there's still a sense that there are some obnoxious fans that are kind of started to just once again talk about the glory day that they of course had. But at least with this team, because of the way that they kind of started to not have as good season as we see in the past, maybe that kind of humbled the fan base a little bit, and to a point where we don't really hate Atlanta United as much as we used to, because they keep winning a lot of games, and the fan base basically letting everybody know and kind of bang their chest that, hey, here we are ATL, we're the team to beat, and and we don't care if you hate us, because we're banging the drum a lot. But also, Joseph Martinez moving on. I mean, I guess if you're an Orlando City fans, that's kind of a good thing, but also it could be a bad thing too, because of the way that, yeah, he basically went from one of your most hated team, if not the most hated team, to another team that you kind of hate in your interstate rival, that is Inter Miami. I mean, I wonder when Joseph Martinez moved to Inter Miami, maybe he had that in mind, the fact that how can I annoy Orlando City more, even if I decide to leave Atlanta United? Oh, why not join Inter Miami? Why not join one of their interstate the rival in the process to do so? But as I said, I think Atlanta, there's times where I started to like them a little bit more compared to where they were. And also, as a Minnesota United fans, I mean, there is kind of that love-hate relationship with the way that they are expansion bros forever, came in the same year as they did. And even though both of those teams kind of suffer opposite kind of fortune with the way that Atlanta United came into the league, setting the league on fire, while Minnesota United was really struggling. There's that expansion bro kind of love, and also kind of that hate relationship too, with the way that I definitely will not forget that U.S. Open Cup final game where the Loons had a great chance to win their first ever silverware, and Atlanta United decided to say, nope, we're gonna win that. And also, remember how they were in CCL for a couple of years because the U.S. Open Cup wasn't played, and they were in CCL just by default that they won it in 2019. That could have been Minnesota United. That could have been the Loons be in multiple CCL kind of competition, just because the U.S. Open Cup is not happening. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of me ranking some of the teams that I hate and some of the teams that I like. Again, there's really not a lot of teams that I put them on this category, and that there's definitely a lot of teams I put put in the like category. Again, this mainly just because of the fact that there's some really good stories in the league. There's kind of more good feel good story in the league compared to just some story that are just kind of started to make a team look like the villain of or well, yeah, being a villain of MLS and a team that many fan base don't tend to like. But if you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments below, and make sure you guys leave a like and smash that subscribe button. And also, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this, and what are some of the team that you hate or love for this upcoming season. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as I said, if you like this, make sure you guys leave a like and smash the subscribe button. And yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.